Hey Stephen students, so we are going to be learning to make a dish called fufu. Fufu is a West African dish, a little bit like rice or like bread. It is kind of in everything. It is one of those big foods, and this one in particular, fufu, happens to have traveled around the world. So as West African slaves were taken over to the Americas, they brought it with them. So you find versions of fufu in the Caribbean and in South America and even in America in a type. So we are going to be making fufu as a West African style, since we've done some West African drumming in the past. And if you guys are able to, I'd love it if you joined in cooking along. So let's join me for some cooking today. So fufu isn't an extremely difficult dish to get the concept of, even though there are a lot of techniques that make it a little hard to make. So we are going to look at what we need. There's not a lot that you're going to need for this, but you will need some very specific things. First of all, you're going to need a big pot, a little ways full of water. So I have a nice deep pot and I fill it about half full of water. A big bowl, something deep that you can get a lot done in. It's extremely important that you have this big bowl. A potato masher. There are different kinds of potato mashers. This is the one that I have. A knife of some kind for you to cut up your food stuff with. And a peeler. That's it. Those are most of the tools you need. Now I'm going to be using a specialized tool with this one that you may not have, but you can do it with the tools I just showed you. That specialized ingredient or a specialized tool is a food processor. This is my stand food processor. I'm going to be using this. It's not essential to use. You can do this with just the potato masher, but I prefer to do it this way. So those are the tools that you're going to need for this. As for actual food, you will need several pounds of yams or sweet potatoes or plantains or cassava or malanga, some kind of very starchy food. Now I'm going to be using yams for mine, but there are sweet potatoes and things that work just as well. You also need salt. Salt goes into everything. Everything tastes better with salt. Pepper also makes everything taste better. You need to have a good amount of pepper. And finally, some type of oil. I will be using olive oil. It's not necessary. Olive oil provides a flavor. You can use any kind of oil you happen to have lying around and it'll work just as well. Now the recipe I have calls for 2 pounds of sweet potatoes or yams. I'm going to go with what I got here. It's not quite 2 pounds, but it'll work. So the very first thing you gotta do is you gotta peel these. Now, as anything, do this with an adult. Have somebody helping you, but you need to get all this peel off. Now, the easiest way to get peel off, especially when you have a weird shape like this one has this nub at the top and so does this one, is to kind of clean them up a little bit before you start peeling. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut these off and then I'm going to peel all of them. Now, a good bit of advice is to have somewhere to put all of your scraps and things to keep your space clean. You want to have a nice clean work surface when you cook. So I am going to clear all of these into a bowl so that I can compost them later. Composting I use in my garden all the time. It's a good way to keep your food nice or keep your garden growing well and to not just waste food. All right, there we go. So next I need to cut up my yams. Now I'm using yams, which are a white starchy food. If I was using sweet potatoes, this would make my fufu orange. So these are not true yams. These are a variant basically of a sweet potato that we use in the United States. True yams look much cooler than these, but it's what I've got. Cassava root is another really good one that's used a lot in Africa as well. So I'm going to cut these into chunks, little cubes, and I want to make sure that they're roughly the same size. It helps them cook at about the same rate. Now, if it's not perfect, it's not perfect, because you're not a chef in a restaurant trying to make something perfect. And either way, we're going to be chunking these up later. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these. All right, so that's my first one. I'll be cutting up my second one. So you might have noticed, it's a little hard to see when the video is sped up, but these were kind of hard to cut through. So I had to put a little force behind it. I'm using a Japanese style knife, which are designed for slicing. And so when I cut, I do this kind of rocking motion with my knife that helps a lot. Keeping my knife nice and sharp also is really useful for this. Making sure, though, that I'm keeping my fingers well back. So you'll see when I make this first cut, my fingers are well back here, and they're actually a little curved to keep them out of the way. This rocks a little bit, so I'm going to place it on the flattest side that I can find. If I don't have a flat side, if it's so perfectly round, I can actually trim a little bit off to make a flat side. That makes your cut way, way safer. So I set my knife where I want it to go, trying to keep it about the same size as this one here. So trying to get, you know, roughly the same size. Again, we're going to be grinding these up and mashing these up, so it doesn't matter as much. But I'm going to set, and I'm going to cut from there. I can keep my fingers well back of the knife, see? Hold it down, and I'm going to rocking motion cut through that. Then I'm going to finish off this, get all of them that size. One other knife cutting tip is when I'm cutting and I have to go long ways and it's hard to hold, I make a little U with my thing and I actually put my knife in between my fingers. That keeps my hand safe. And there we go. That's all of my yams cut up into cubes. Now, the closer they are in size, the more evenly they will cook. So I have a couple that are very small, like this one, and a couple that are larger, like this one, which means my cook times are going to be a little bit different. They're not going to be quite as even. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be mashing these up. So if these ones get really mushy, it doesn't matter as much as these. Now, if I was making, say, a hash, I would cut them all exactly the same size so that they all cooked at the same rate. So the next thing I have to do is I have to get these soft, and I'm going to do that by boiling them. So I start with my pot of water. I'm going to add salt to my water right away. This is a quick way to get your food tasting salty just to start with. And I kind of want a good bit of salt. You'll see I'm kind of pouring from above. And then I'm going to, into my cold water, I'm going to place my yams. I could do this later when the water's boiling like I would do with pasta, but truthfully, it splashes a lot and I don't want to burn my hands on the boiling water. So I'm going to do everything I can off to the side here, just like this. All right, these have got to boil, so I'll come back when they are done. Sorry guys, I just realized that my video wasn't on, so I've done a couple of steps without you. I added salt and pepper. That is done to taste as much as you'd like. I also added olive oil. Now you can see that my yams are still steaming. They're gonna need to cool in a little bit. Now what I did after I got those in was I mashed the yams up. And I could just keep mashing at this point if I really wanted to. I'm going to use a food processor just because I can, and it makes less time. If you are going to mash, you're going to mash until they are very, very, very beaten up. And then you're going to be mixing with a wooden spoon. I did reserve for myself a cup of the yam cooking water in case I needed it. So I'm going to go ahead and run these through a food processor, get them the consistency they're supposed to, and then I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. So this is the consistency you want, something like very, very fine mashed potatoes. Now, the thing I saw said to let it cool, I'm going to go ahead and actually just go for it at this point because beating it is going to cool it down. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my spoon and I'm going to be just going to town on this until it becomes effectively like a dough. So I'm trying to get it to the point where it's like a bread dough, so elastic and a little bit sticky. So I'm going to beat this and I'm going to let you watch because it's fun and it'll go fast. All right, and that's about where I'm going to get to with it. You can see it's gotten a little bit thicker. If I was doing this with like a cassava groat or a true yam, I would actually get it even further. If I wanted to, I could add flour to it to thicken up even more, make it a little more like a dough, but I'm going to leave it where it's at. I'm fine with the texture. In true West African style, this actually gets formed into balls that you then pick out and then you dip it into a stew. So, you know, if you want to go that far, you can. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of constant stirring like you saw me doing, but for a much longer period of time. It's kind of up to you. So have fun. If you make fufu, send me a video. I'd love to see them. All right, bye Stevens, guys.